Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for a fabulous story tonight. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. I don't want to go, I said, standing at the end of my bed, stamping my feet, like a petulant, precocious brat that was having a hissy fit, as I wasn't having my own way. I was fully aware of my juvenile behaviour. Of course I was, but I couldn't help myself. The anger inside me was combustible. It had been like that ever since my mother had left home 4 years ago. I could not forgive her for abandoning us in the cruel way she did, for the likes of Connor Dumbarton. My suitcase was wide open, gaping like a hungry mouth that needed feeding, but I was struggling to get packed. The last thing I wanted was to see my mother again. Indignant tears streamed down my face like sorry raindrops on a glass pane. Why do I have to go, Dad? It's not fair. It's not fair. Why are you making me do this? I said, glaring at him defiantly. My father's face looked melancholic. Let's just say after my mother left us 4 years ago, there was no doubt in my mind that the bright spark inside of him had burnt out as he tried desperately to pick up the pieces of his life again. I knew my mother's fortuitous departure from our lives had hit him hard, as if he'd been run over by a freight train. I could see the sorrow in my father's steely grey eyes, and over the last 4 years it had never left his face. My grieving father now walked with a slight limp in his step, and his shoulders were hunched over, as if he'd been battered by the world, as my mother, choosing to leave the both of us so cold-heartedly, had done this to him, and I hated her for it. Even though my father was now in his mid-40s, he looked more like he was in his late 50s, early 60s, or even 70s, as his haggard skin was feathered with fine lines, and the area around his eyes was like the crinkles you see in a packet of potato chips. And his once dark hair had sadly grown grey within weeks after my mother left us, which clearly shows the dramatic impact her leaving had on our lives. "Sweetheart," said my father to me, "no one is making you do anything you don't want to do. I know it's hard, but you do need to go to America. It's the right thing to do. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for me. If you do this one thing, you will make me a very happy man indeed. Remember, you won't be away for long. And if you're desperately unhappy, I will come and get you myself. And that's a promise," he assured me, giving me a salute. "Please, Lucy, give your mother a chance, will you? Don't be so unreasonably hard on her. Before you know it, you'll be back home with me where you belong. You never know. You might actually enjoy yourself. You're going to an enviably beautiful part of the world. And I'm sure some of your friends at school would happily trade places with you to go to America in a heartbeat. It's a spectacular country." "Well, they're welcome to do just that. They can have my plane ticket as far as I'm concerned. See if I care. Dad, I hate her. I really hate her. And I don't want to go to America. It's so far away from home. Why do I have to go? Why don't I have any rights concerning my own life? It's not fair. I'm old enough to make my own decisions. I don't need adults making them for me." "Sweetheart, calm down," said my father, sitting down on the end of the bed beside me, taking my hand in his. My father had beautiful hands with long fingers, and when he took my hand I always felt incredibly safe, as if nothing could ever go wrong in this big bad world of ours, of which so much really does. Even at my young, tender age, I was profoundly aware of this fact, as let's not kid, life can be brutally hard. Of course you have your rights. You're allowed to express your opinions. But I would like you to see things from my perspective for a moment, as your father. Look, I know you're mad with your mother, but it's time to let go of your rage. Your mother gave you into my charge because you didn't want to go and live with her. Imagine how it must have cut her to the quick to hear you tell her you never wanted to speak to her ever again. It broke her heart, it did, that you refused to go to America with her. She could have put her foot down and made you go with her, and she would have been perfectly within her rights to do so. But she did not. She let you live with me here in England. Your mother needs to see you from time to time, Lucy. Surely you understand that. You cannot shut her off like this. It's not healthy. I've been speaking to her recently on my cell phone, and she's been begging to see you again. She misses the bones of you, Lucy. She understands, of course, that you're very aggrieved with her, but she really wants to make it up to you. She does, and she says you will love it where she's living. Her husband Connor, who was widowed from his last wife, has 2 boys round about your age from that marriage, who are literally dying to meet their stepsister. She has told them all about you. I don't care about any of that. I'm 15 years old, Dad. Why are you sticking up for Mum after everything she did to you? She sandblasted our lives as if we were the sandstone in a quarry. And you're being nice to her. I just don't understand it. Why are you so forgiving? She betrayed us, Dad. Why aren't you angry? You forget that I was married to your mother for 14 years, Lucy. I loved her very much. You don't stop caring for someone when you've been with them for a long time, even if they hurt you badly. Life does not work like that. Your mother may have cheated on me, but there are 2 sides to every story. Clearly something was not working in our marriage, which I failed to see. It's a little like a leak in the roof of your house that you wantonly ignore until finally you realize it's fallen on top of you, and you can't dismiss it any longer, as the problem is staring you blazingly in the face. If the truth be told, Lucy, I was clearly not giving your mother everything she needed in her relationship with me at the time. I do remember her expressing her frustration and extreme misgivings with me, that I never wanted to go anywhere with her. She thought I was socially retarded. Your mother loved interacting with people all the time. She'd be running here and running there. She'd be up and down like a yo-yo. She wasn't interested in sitting back to read a novel. She wanted to be out and about, doing things all the time, painting the town red, so to speak. By contrast, I wanted to chill, so the cracks in the relationship were beginning to show. We both wanted different things out of life. And for a relationship to successfully work, you need to be on the same page with your partner. I failed your mother. She wouldn't have cheated on me otherwise. I have taken full responsibility for the demise of our relationship. I suspect we were just both wrong for each other. It happens when you marry young like I did, and are swept off your feet by the bubble of your infatuation. Don't make excuses for her, Dad. Mum's a slapper. She clandestinely hooked up with an American man when she started taking those riding treks into the countryside. Don't you remember? That was where she met him, Dad. They had an affair behind your back. He was living in the UK for 2 years to get a company of his started out here. You knew nothing about what was going on until Mum told you she was in love with someone else. And then she just buggered off with this man to America. She dumped you, Dad, like an old sack of seeding potatoes that she no longer wanted. How can you possibly be nice about her after what she did to you? I just don't get it. I really don't. As I told you, sweetheart, nothing is always just black and white. There's always the murky in-between grey areas that can be easily overlooked. Let's just say when me and your mother first got married, we were very attracted to each other physically. We were young, callow, whimsical, naive, and believed our attraction to each other was enough to sustain our relationship long term. But sadly, down the tributaries of life, we soon learnt we had nothing in common. I think we ignored the elephant in the room after you came along. We muddied along steadily and did everything we could to make the relationship work. But I think your mother struggled with me. If your mother had not left me, Lucy, for Connor Dumbarton, she'd have left me anyway for somebody else, or even to be on her own, even if no cheating was involved. Your mother found me boring. She wanted more for herself and more for her life. And I respect her for that, Lucy. You have to do what's right for you in life, or you're not honouring your truth. You cannot possibly hate her for that. You're not boring, Dad. Where did you get that idea from? Don't put yourself down like this. Mum is the one to blame here. You deserved so much better than her, Dad. She treated you like dirt. It's disgusting. And her new husband, what's his name again? Connor Dumbarton, said my father. Connor Dumbarton was pretty dumb, if you ask me. To get involved with a married woman. He's as bad as Mum is. They deserve each other. I hope they both rot in hell. You don't mean that, Lucy. That's the anger talking. You're kind, Lucy. You've got a good heart. So lashing out like this, of course I understand it. But it's unnecessary. And I'm quite sure Connor Dumbarton is a very, very nice man. Maybe your mother found she had a lot in common with him. She found he met a need within her that I was unable to supply. Despite everything, Lucy, your mother is a very good woman. I'm sure she's not proud of how things panned out, and regrets some of the mistakes she made along the way, as do I. The great thing about mistakes is you learn from them, Lucy, and that is invaluable to one's personal growth. Beyond all that, sometimes in life you just need to forgive. You cannot hate your mother forever. She loves you with all her heart. You are her little girl, and nothing will ever change that. She needs to see you, Lucy, and even if you refuse to admit it, you also need your mother. You should not sever your relationship with her like this, based on what she did back then. It's not serving you, sweetheart, to react so negatively towards your mother. In truth, it makes you bitter. At the end of the day, all you're hurting is yourself. Dad, don't you get it? I do not need my mother. She doesn't need me. I'd be happy if I never ever saw her again as long as I live. Mum cheated on you. I can't get over how nice you're being about her. I just don't understand it. We were happy as a family until she told you she was leaving you for that American man. And now she's actually married to him. I can't believe she did that to you and to us. I hate her for it. As I keep telling you, Lucy, and I hope I'm not sounding like a broken record, but you don't mean that. We all say things we don't mean when we're hurting. It's human nature. We often attack the very things we love the most when we are sad. If you didn't love your mother, you wouldn't be so infuriated with her, would you? Both love and hate are very passionate emotions. If you really were insouciant and indifferent about your mother, you would not be reacting like this. Despite everything, I believe under the layers of your denial, you love your mother very much indeed. I'm personally glad you're going to America. You haven't seen your mother for 4 years. That needs to be rectified. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how welcome the Dumbartons will make you feel in their home. and I am of the opinion that you're going to have an amazing time in America. Maybe you won't even want to come back." "Are you kidding, Dad? Of course I'll come back. I told you, I'd be happy if I never saw Mum again. It's only because of you I'm choosing to go to America. Not that I'm choosing at all. Otherwise I'd never go, even if you paid me $1 million. "Well, it goes without saying that Cupcake and Sprinkle here will miss you almost as much as I do. Almost." On hearing their names being mentioned, our two beloved basset hounds began to bark excitedly, as if expressing their agreement that I would indeed be missed greatly while I was away. In a trice the sound of the doorbell trilling through the house created pandemonium and momentary chaos, as with wagging tails and excited barking, our two boisterous dogs eagerly bolted out of my bedroom, down the staircase of our 350-year-old cottage. The whole house rattled and shook on its foundations as the dogs charged through the house like two rockets being discharged into space. "Let me guess," said my father. "That must be Paul." My father made a sympathetic face. "That poor boy. He's going to be missing you a bunch while you're away, Lucy. The two of you have been inseparable since you were knee-high to a grasshopper and trotting around the place in diapers. This will be the longest you've been away from each other, I would imagine." It was true. Paul Dragmonger was my best friend, and was like a brother to me, and was older than me by a couple of months. I knew leaving him would really, really suck, but my father had refused to buy a ticket for him to come with me to America. He felt I needed to go alone. "Send him up, Dad. I hope he'll help me with my packing, because I can't decide what I need to take," I said, wiping the remnants of my tears away from my face. I certainly didn't want Paul to see me in such a sorry state, but I so wished he was coming with me to America. We had always done things together as a team, from going to concerts, parties and vacations. "We'll do so," said my father. "I'm just hoping Paul can talk some sense into that head of yours and make you realize that going to America will be an awe-inspiring adventure for you." "It would be, Dad, if I was going to be going with you and with Paul. But this is hardly what I consider a holiday. It's more like paying a debt that I don't want to pay, or going to a dentist to have teeth extracted. It sucks, big time." "Well, I better go and answer the door, before Paul breaks it down," my father teased, "or before Sprinkle and Cupcake scratch the wood even more fiercely than they already have done." I heard my father charging down the staircase with his leather boots. The stairs groaned under my father's substantial weight, as he was a tall man, and the house was incredibly old. Soon I guessed he was at the front door, where the dogs were scratching to get out, and making those excitable squeaking sounds. I could hear my father talking to Paul in the entrance hall. I knew, of course, they were talking about me. I heard Paul say, "Yes, Mr. Calcaccio, I'm really going to miss her. It's going to be weird without her around. Where is she?" "She's upstairs, trying her level best to pack. But as yet, nothing has succeeded in being placed into her suitcase. She's stalling for time, I suspect, procrastinating rather too much," I heard my father say. "She's in a right cranky mood. Doesn't want to go to America. You know what she's like when she's resolutely stubborn." "I know, Mr. Calcaccio," I heard Paul laugh. "I think it's good she's going to America, though. I really do. It would be cool to go with her, but she does need to go alone. She needs time with her mum." I made a face, hearing Paul say that. He was my best friend, for God's sake. He shouldn't be talking like this to my father. "Very well said, Paul. Every daughter needs their mother," I heard my father say. "I'm glad you appreciate this, Paul. Maybe you can drill some common sense into my daughter." "I'll try my best, Mr. Calcaccio. But you know what Lucy's like. She's as stubborn as old boots. Shifting her opinion is like drilling into the core of the earth itself. Well, you go upstairs, Paul.
Help her with her packing, will you? She hasn't got a thing in that suitcase of hers yet. She's about as enthusiastic about going abroad as I am about doing my accounts."
Seconds later, familiar feet padded up the staircase at a fast pace. I knew they belonged to Paul, as the staircase barely groaned under his weight, as Paul, although tall for his age, was lanky and didn't weigh terribly much. Then there he was, standing in the doorway of my bedroom, looking melancholic. He lived in the cottage next door to ours, and since we were toddlers we'd practically lived in each other's pockets. Paul was the late lamb in his family, the unexpected baby his mother birthed late in life. So all his brothers and sisters had long since left home, so he'd been raised solo by his parents, almost as if he was an only child. I was his immediate next-door neighbour, so we literally did everything together, from when we were trotting around in diapers, with pacifiers in our mouths. Paul became like a brother to me. I'd never seen him look out of sorts before. I noticed on this morning he didn't appear to have run a comb through his blonde hair, that looked unusually wild, as if he'd just got out of bed the wrong side, and was rather dishevelled. He was usually so well put together, wearing chinos and smart pinstripe shirts. He always looked rather debonair, even when he dressed very casual. It was just the way he was. But today he looked rather battered and worn out, with telltale dark circles under his eyes, which made me secretly suspect he was somewhat sleep-deprived. I realized in that moment Paul really was terribly sad to see me go to America, even though I'd only be gone for 4 weeks. But at that time of my life, 4 weeks was an agonizingly long period of time, and the thought of 4 weeks away from home, the home that I knew and loved, was objectionable to say the very least. "Don't just stand there in the doorway, Paul, like a guest," I said, gesturing for him to come into my bedroom. "Why are you staring at me like a gog-eyed goldfish, as if you've never seen me before a day in your life?" "Oh, am I? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. It's just I can't believe you're going all the way to America. I'm going to miss you, Lucy, not being around for the summer holidays. It's a bummer, but I guess I'll live. It's going to be strange without you around, that's all. I'm going to be doing everything on my own from now on. I guess it's going to be a rather lonely holiday." "Tell me about it," I told him, making a contorted face. "I don't want to go abroad any more than you want me to leave. But Dad is piling on all the pressure for me to go, on my mother's account, of course. He feels desperately sorry for her, even though she was the one that kicked him in the guts all those years ago. Can you believe that? The good news is, if it's any consolation to the both of us, we can at least talk to each other and communicate every day on our cell phones. It's not like we'll be out of touch, is it?" "It's not the same, though, is it, Lucy?" said Paul. "I mean, talking on a phone isn't the same as seeing someone in person. I'm sorry, but it's not." "I know it's not. You're right about that, Paul. But you have to admit it's better than nothing. I just wish I wasn't going abroad to be with my mother. I hate her for what she did to us. I can't believe she's insisted that I go and stay with her. She's got a real nerve, don't you think, demanding I go. I'm 15 years old, for goodness sake. I should have rights. That's what it boils down to, rights." Paul looked reflective. "To be fair, Lucy, your father's right. You should meet up with your mother again. I remember she was a lovely lady. I do remember her quite well, actually. I'm sure she wants to see you again. I know she loves you very much." I snorted. "Love? Are you kidding, Paul? That woman wouldn't know the meaning of the word. What she did to me and Dad was not love. I'm sorry it wasn't. I thought at the very least you of all people, Paul, would be on my side. See things from my perspective. In a nutshell, I wouldn't be going abroad if my mother was still married to my father, would I? Everything would be like it used to be. Things were good back then, until my mother chose to leave us, to become a selfish, self-centered prima donna and float off into the sunset like an autumn leaf on the wind."
I'm not taking sides, Lucy, said Paul obsequiously. It's about doing the right thing by your mother, for the greater good, and hopefully you can mend some bridges while you're at it. I mean, you can learn from my own life if it helps you. My mother, for example, has not spoken to her own father in years, he said, sounding sad. They had a fallout many years ago, and it's had long-lasting repercussions on our family, like when you throw a stone in the water and everything ripples. Get this, my mother still cannot remember why she and her own father fell out in the way they did, which makes the whole thing all the more ridiculous. But both my grandfather and mother continue the feud, even though they don't even know what it's about. Adults can be so weird. So they've literally not spoken to each other in years, which is absolutely insane. The worst part is I've never met my mother's parents because of their dispute. And it's a shame, it really is. Neither did my older siblings, who left home a long time ago. We've all missed out because of my mother's fallout with her parents. I would personally have loved a relationship with my grandparents, but it wasn't to be, Lucy. I know my mother regrets what happened between her and her father, but both of them are far too proud and far too stubborn to reach out to each other, to settle their differences and make amends, which would actually bring healing to our family. But I doubt it will ever happen. But one day my mother will regret it when her parents die. My dad thinks that will be the moment, when she thinks what an idiot she's been, that she should have made up with them a long time ago. But by that time, it'll be all too late. With the greatest of respect, Paul, I failed to see how your mother's relationship with her own grandfather has to do with my relationship with my own mother. I think it has a whole lot as it happens. Think about it for a moment, Lucy. Imagine one day you have children of your own. Do you really want them not to have a relationship with their grandmother? You'll be doing them an injustice. I know, because I know what it feels like firsthand. If you don't fix your differences between you and your mother, you'll always live with regret of what your relationship with her could have potentially been. If you hadn't been so stubbornly obstinate, proud and opinionated, you'll be like my mother, with her relationship with her own dad, and by then it'll be too late to reach out to her because it'll be impossibly hard to do so, because the longer you leave it, the harder it is. I'm only saying this, Lucy, not to get at you, but for your own good, because you're like a sister to me. Not that I'm any good, of course, at doling out advice. I mean, you don't want to live with regret, do you? He paused for a brief moment and said, Worst case scenario, Lucy. Imagine if something bad were to happen to your mum. If she was run over by a bus tomorrow. I bet then it would hit you hard. You'd be left with the guilt of the fact that you'd never repaired your relationship with her. And now you can't do anything about it. It happens a lot, you know, in life. People in hindsight wishing they had the balls to have made better choices and stepped away from their pride and their comfort zone by doing the right thing, making amends. My dad says the human ego gets in the way of everything and accounts for so many problems in human relationships. And I think he's right, you know. I do too, Paul. Your dad is a very clever man, and he does make some good points. But it doesn't make my going to America any easier. Besides, I don't know anything about my mother's new life. Do you realise, Paul, I know nothing about her, apart from the fact that she married a man called Connor Dumbarton, who she met here in England. I do know he came to live here for about 2 years with his 2 boys, Cameron and Hamish. He was here in England to set up an American company, which he started up in the UK. I know he was widowed at the time, as his wife tragically died of a brain aneurysm. When he came here to this country, he went on these horse riding trails on the weekend. That's where he met my mother. She secretly got into a relationship with him behind my father's back. Even I was completely unaware of what was going on. They were together for 2 years, seeing each other clandestinely, until my mother announced to Dad that she was in love with someone else, which devastated the both of us and shattered our lives, quite literally. My mother went back with Connor Dumbarton to America and then married him. She wanted me to go with her, but I point-blank refused. I told her I never wanted to see her ever again. Me and my dad, we had no clue any of this was going on. And when I learnt what she had done, I hated her with a burning passion, and I still do. Paul made a sympathetic face. I get why you're angry, Lucy. I mean, if my mother did that to us, I'd also be peeved. But how come you know so little about her, since she left for England? Surely you know something about her life in America. I thought you said she was always sending you letters in the post, but you blocked her on your cell phone. That's right. She was sending me letters in the post, and she still is, as it happens, I said, walking over to my closet, fiddling around on the top shelf to retrieve a shoebox filled with my mother's letters, all addressed to me. You're kidding me, said Paul, looking rather aghast, as he stared in bewilderment at the shoebox of letters I was carrying in my hands. You mean she wrote you all these? He said, looking at the letters in admiration and wondrous awe. Are they all from your mother? I nodded. That's right, they're from her. They go back over 4 years, I told him. And you haven't opened any of them? Asked Paul, his eyes widening in surprise. I can't believe you, Lucy. Why have you not read her letters? That's seriously crazy. Because I hate her, that's why, said Lucy. I hate her. Why would I want to read anything that she writes me? I blocked her number on my cell phone. I disabled her ability to communicate with me. So my mother did the next best thing, didn't she? I said, running my hands over the envelopes. She sent me these, hoping that I'd actually read them. But guess what, Paul? I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I can see you haven't opened any of them, Paul repeated, as if he was trying to get his head around this rather startling revelation. Of course I haven't. Of course I wouldn't open any of them, Paul, I said scathingly. I told you, I don't want to have anything to do with my mother. I'm jealous of you having so many letters, Lucy, said Paul, staring at the letters enviously. I can't believe you haven't opened them. This is the way people used to communicate in the old days with each other. Imagine what it must have been like. You'd wait to hear news from your loved one abroad by post, and when the letter finally arrived, you'd be tearing it open with excitement, as if it was Christmas Day, wondering what news your loved one had to convey to you. These days, communication is pretty much instant, isn't it? But back then, you had to wait for news to arrive from across the water. Imagine what that must have been like. There must be over 400 letters here, Lucy, in the shoebox of yours. Yet you haven't opened even one of them. That's insane, if you ask me. Are you not at least a little curious to read what's inside of them? I could have torn them up a long time ago, I reminded him, but I didn't. You know how I wish someone would write me a letter on paper in an envelope like this? All I ever get is a message on my cell phone, usually in shorthand scroll, said Paul, making a face. Some of the old ways are much more exciting, before technology finally came along, to ruin the romantic side of our lives. I can't believe you haven't opened any of them yet. Even if I was wearing your shoes, and I was mad with my mother, I'd still have to read the letter she wrote me. It would be like an itch that I had to scratch. You're about as unorthodox as you can get, Lucy. You've not even been tempted, even the slightest, to open the letters. You know nothing about your mother as a consequence. It's crazy, if you ask me. I told you, I said curtly. I don't want to know anything about my mother. If you want to read the letters, Paul, you're welcome to. Be my guest. Go ahead, read them. But I don't want to know what she has to say. Besides, I've got my packing to do, haven't I? I still haven't put anything into my suitcase yet. You don't mind my reading your personal post? Paul asked me. You don't mind me opening up this whole pile of letters, reading them all? Of course I don't mind, Paul. I want nothing to do with them. You can tear them up into fine pieces, for all I care. Paul greedily grabbed the box of envelopes from my hands, as if I'd given him a box of Oreos that he wanted to munch down, and was scared I was quickly going to change my mind and suddenly retract my offer. He promptly sat down on the end of my bed, with a shoebox resting on his knees, as he fingered through the post, randomly pulling out letters and tearing them open. I guess I hadn't expected him to take up my offer, so I was somewhat thrown off guard. Paul looked like a kid in a candy store. He was opening up the letters with an eagerness that was beginning to make me a tad jealous. I had missed out on that kind of fun. I was beginning to secretly wish I could snatch the letters away from him, but I couldn't do that now. I had given him carte blanche to read them all. I tried to pack my suitcase while Paul was reading my letters, crinkling the paper in his fingers. I began hurriedly folding up sweaters and shorts, laying them messily in my suitcase. I felt significantly distracted as I watched Paul's facial expressions as he read the letters, as if in some way I could discern what they might be saying. In a trice I seemed to become even more curious about the letters that I'd wilfully neglected for so long. I was flooded with an eagerness to know what my mother had actually written to me, but I'd be damned if I would admit this to Paul, or even to myself, as it would mean I was interested in my mother. In truth, even my father had absolutely no knowledge that I'd never read the letters she had written to me. My father probably assumed I was much more clued up about my mother's life than I actually really was. In truth, I knew nothing about her life in America, and now I was going there. I had no idea about what to expect on my visit. I didn't know exactly where she lived, what the area was like, or anything about my so-called stepbrothers. Nothing at all. I was completely in the dark. Don't mind me, said Paul nonchalantly, as if he was eating a delicious pile of pancakes with maple syrup and ice cream, and I was watching him, salivating with envy, while on a seriously deprived diet. You get on with your packing while I read your mother's letters. This is so cool. By the time I've finished reading them, I'll know more about your mother than you do, he said proudly. The latter statement really pushed my buttons. I bit my lip awkwardly and snapped, Well, as I said, I don't want to know anything about her. So there we are. That's the end of part 1 of our story. Part 2 is tomorrow night. I'm beginning to wonder what might be in some of those letters. Let's find out tomorrow night. Until then, goodbye and good night.